Quickly before the video starts, I just wanted to let you know that the BetterHelp sponsorship money has been donated to 3 charities, and the total amount going to charities is £3,889.43, or around $5,160. More on this at the end of the video. We're back again with a part 2 of the Dystopian Futures tier list. My main man Claus has another payment waiting for... No. This can't be. All the man wanted to do was sell you pod real estate and reasonably priced bug burgers. It was perfect, but no, you just had to blow it up. You and your pride and your ego. I think to commemorate his hard work, we should comment under this video so that he can realize how much we truly appreciate him. Here's my comment to Klaus. You may notice that I've included temporally relevant topics and words that may or may not be good for the algorithm, but you guys can freestyle. Anyway, to continue his legacy, we're going to be doing a part 2 to the tier list, and we'll just get into it. The first dystopian future that we'll be looking at will be The Minority Report, a novel written by Philip K. Dick. They also made a movie by the same name with Tom Cruise, which is what the visual aid will be, but the book has a much better plot in my opinion. The protagonist, John Allison Anderton, is the founder of the law enforcement system known as pre-crime. Through the analysis of the predictions of 3 mutant humans called precogs, they can predict all crimes before they occur. The pre-crime system uses this to successfully reduce crime in this future by arresting the perpetrators before they commit the crime. All is going well until a report comes through that Anderton himself is going to commit a murder in the next week. Anderton, suspicious of the findings, is convinced that his second-in-command, named Whitwer, is behind the report in a bid to oust him. The report states that he will murder Leopold Kaplan, a retired army general. Anderton decides to flee the planet to avoid being detained, but is picked up by the police and taken to see Kaplan. Anderton tries to plead his case, but Kaplan insists that he be taken to jail as a precaution. He is loaded onto a car to be transported to jail, but is freed by a man named Fleming. Fleming helps him escape and gives him a tip to look into the Minority Report. Anderton later gains access to the precog tapes and learns that the 3 mutated humans often have 2 agreeing reports, the majority, and a singular dissenting report, which is the Minority Report. The Minority Report states that he will not murder Kaplan. After reading this, Lisa, Anderton's wife, enters the room and tells him that he needs to leave the planet and will offer him a ride, but betrays him in the helicopter, stating that he should turn himself in order to keep the integrity of the pre-crime system. Fully believing that Anderton is innocent, and in spite of this, still telling him to turn himself in. Because if Anderton is free, he would be forced to murder Kaplan, and if he doesn't, then the system doesn't work. Fleming, the ultimate deus ex machina, comes out of nowhere and starts strangling her. Anderton, upon seeing this, knocks him out and upon reading his identification finds out that Fleming was secretly working with Kaplan to make sure that he remained out of jail so that the pre-crime system can be proven wrong. Anderton, after calling Whitwer, finds out that Kaplan has a copy of the Minority Report and is set to read it out loud at an army rally to publicly prove that the pre-crime system doesn't work so that he can usher in a military coup and martial law. Hearing this, Anderton decides to keep the integrity of the pre-crime system intact and shoots Kaplan, killing him, and thus proving the pre-crime system's prediction to be true. Anderton is then arrested and he and his wife are then exiled to an off-world colony. And in the end, Anderton realizes that the 3 reports were not generated simultaneously. Each was affected by Anderton's knowledge of the previous report. Report 1 said that he would kill Kaplan to save pre-crime. Report 2 said that upon reading Report 1, he would not murder Kaplan. Report 3 said that Kaplan would discredit the pre-crime system and bring about martial law and military rule, so Anderton would murder him to save pre-crime. And the 2 reports stating that he would murder Kaplan became the Majority Report, and the 1 dissenting report was the Minority Report. And that's the basic plot of the Minority Report. First thing I have to say, a story about predicting crime and murder, and it's called the Minority Report. It's a bit on the nose, but okay. But Now let's get into the pros and cons of this dystopian future. The pros. 1. The mutated humans were literally 100% correct, and the pre-crime system was never disproven. It correctly predicted that Kaplan would be murdered by Anderton. Regardless of how the plot made it to that outcome, it was still correct. 2. That means that in this dystopian future, they have the ability to correctly bring crime to zero and live in a crime-free utopia by removing those who will commit crimes preemptively. 3. The benefits of living in a society where there is little to no crime would be massive and immediately felt. 4. Because the mutated humans are dispassionate and have no connections to the accused, they have no motives to ever lie about their reports, meaning that, barring any outside interference, this pre-crime system is 100% just and fair. 5. Even if the pre-crime system wasn't 100% accurate, the mere idea that there is an all-knowing system that will predict and stop you from committing murders is enough of a deterrent to stop people from committing murders. Now for the cons. The only real con that I can think of is that, like in the story, the system can be exploited by nefarious enough actors to bring about real tyranny. But other than that, it's a pretty good dystopian future to live in. And for those reasons, it's going into the Take Me There Now tier. To be honest, not the worst future for humanity. Up next we have 1984, a novel written by George Orwell. The story is set in Great Britain, though now it's called Airstrip 1 and is part of a larger Oceania superstate that is at war with two other major superstates, East Asia and Eurasia. The population is split into three main classes: the inner party that are effectively the government, the outer party which carries out the orders of the inner party, and the proles, which are just the working class people who work in factories and keep the country running. The three main superstates are at war, but it's implied that the wars aren't actually meant to be won and are coordinated so that they can keep the masses under the fear of the enemy and keep up the production of a wartime economy. The party is supposedly led by a figure known as Big Brother, who is always watching, and whom the party members are expected to love unconditionally. In the book, though, it's implied that he doesn't exist and is only a means for the party to exert control on the outer party and the proles. The protagonist, Winston Smith, is part of the outer party and works for the Ministry of Truth. He's tasked with rewriting the past so that it's more in line with the party's official narrative. He keeps a diary that he has to hide from the telescreen and surveillance that is in every room of every outer party member's living quarters, and he uses this diary to have pretend conversations with O'Brien, who is an inner party member who Winston believes could be working for the Brotherhood, which is a rumoured underground counter-party organisation that seeks to overthrow the party. Winston also uses the diary as a means to stay sane, as you're not allowed to express thoughts or ideas. This is further exacerbated by the enforcement of a Newspeak language, which doesn't allow for complex thoughts or ideas, so that the people speaking it can't have any ideas of rebellion against the state. Winston eventually finds a woman, Julia, who he falls in love with, and they both commit the thought crime of passion. Winston meets up with Julia regularly in a room above a bookstore that has no telescreen so that they can't be watched. The owner of the bookstore sold Winston his diary, and Winston believes that he is an ally to the cause. Shortly thereafter, Winston is contacted by O'Brien, who tells him that the Brotherhood is real and hands him a book written by Emmanuel Goldstein, an ex-party leader who was exiled for betraying the party, telling Winston that this is what he needs to join the Brotherhood. Turns out that O'Brien was actually lying, and the Thought Police arrest Julia and Winston. Winston then finds out that the bookstore owner was also a member of the Thought Police and that he had sold them out to O'Brien. While locked up, O'Brien begins to torture Winston for several months to get him to betray Julia, but this is to no avail, until he's finally brought to room 101, which contains Winston's greatest fear, the fear of being eaten alive by rats. And right before the cage is opened to begin this torture method, Winston caves and betrays Julia, telling them to torture her instead. Winston, now finally broken, is let out and spends his days unemployed, often sitting at a cafe. Winston, watching the telescreen, accepts everything that he hears as fact. He then writes out the equation 2 + 2 = 5, signifying his full conformity to believing whatever the party says. He then reminisces about a meeting with Julia after being released, and that they no longer feel anything for each other, and they both admit to betraying each other. He looks back at the telescreen and is relieved to hear the news of victory at the front lines. He is overjoyed with tears, fully accepting that he now loves Big Brother. And that is the end of the book. Now, you hear all this talk about ministries of truth and thought police and whatnot, and you might be thinking, geez, how's he going to spin this? Well, for starters, in this dystopian future, the government actually gives everyone a job to work, so although not stated outright, they have reduced unemployment to 0%. 2. I don't know about you, but working for the Ministry of Truth sounds kind of cool. Not to get sidetracked or anything, but imagine if World War III did break out. What kind of job do you think the government would assign you? For me, they'd probably make me work in propaganda or a Ministry of Truth of some kind, running disinformation campaigns on the enemy and telling half-truths to the public, which is not too dissimilar to what I'm already doing. So, most of you guys would probably be soldiers or factory workers though, so maybe not as fun for you guys. Anyway, point 2, Ministry of Truth sounds kind of fun. 3. Because there is only one party, that means that the nation has been unified and there are no partisan party conflicts. 4. Because the party tells everyone they are in a constant state of war, that means that productivity is through the roof. GDP is probably at an all-time high, which is obviously a good thing. And for the cons, a pretty major one. The party has outlawed love, and is life really worth living without love? In my opinion, no. So, a pretty big con for this dystopian future. And that's all she wrote for 1984. Not the worst dystopian future, but there are others on this list that are just better in my opinion. So for those reasons, I'm going to put it in the completely fine tier. The final dystopian future that we'll look at in this video will be the dystopian future of WALL-E. A fun one, but one I'm sure that everyone has seen, so it will be briefer than the others. The year is 2805 and the Earth is covered in mountains of garbage. 700 years ago, a mega corporation named By and Large took control of the world's economy, and in only a few short years of mass consuming, the entire planet was filled with garbage and was getting unmanageable. The CEO of B&L sponsored a 5-year trip aboard a fleet of cruise ships that would allow them to leave the planet, whilst thousands of waste allocation load lifter Earth-class units, or WALL-Es, would compact the massive piles of garbage into neat cubes that would then be incinerated. The 5-year plan didn't go according to plan, however, and the cruise liners would stay in outer space indefinitely as, unsurprisingly, the Earth was still uninhabitable after the 5 years. And this is the status quo for about 700 years until WALL-E eventually finds a plant still alive under some garbage. Unaware of what it is, he takes it back to his truck. Shortly after the finding of the plant, an automated spaceship sent by Axiom cruise liners lands on Earth, and with it, an extraterrestrial vegetation evaluator, or Eve. Eve eventually befriends WALL-E, and upon being shown the plant, takes the plant and starts signaling to regroup with the Axiom. Whilst on the Axiom, the boot is stolen by the onboard AI Auto, who wants to destroy the plant. This was because the B&L Corporation, after realizing that Earth was uninhabitable, gave a new directive that Earth was never to be returned to. So, following those orders, the plant had to be destroyed, as it would allow the humans to return to Earth. This indefinite stay in space has led to all the humans on the ship becoming obese due to the mindless consumption of both food and entertainment for basically their whole existence. But eventually the captain, when shown the plant, is convinced to take the Axiom back to Earth to try and make amends for all the pollution and damage and to try and plant the plant. A fight with the Auto AI system ensues, but eventually WALL-E sacrifices his life to ensure the plant is analysed by the ship and Auto is deactivated whilst they set course for Earth. And on Earth, Wall-E is revived by Eve and everyone lives happily ever after. But you have to ask yourself, was life on the Axiom really all that dystopian? I don't think so. For the pros. 1. In this dystopian future, world hunger is eradicated. As you just saw, everyone on that spaceship was morbidly obese, so clearly there wasn't any dire need to ration their food supply. 2. Everyone seemed pretty happy, being able to do whatever they wanted to without having to work at all. It was basically a communist paradise, except it actually worked, where anyone could do anything they wanted to without actually having to work. 3. The people didn't necessarily even have to be obese. The auto AI didn't really care as long as they were safe, and there are a bunch of amenities on the ship to keep you entertained and healthy. What's funny is that the humans' body types were supposedly comically obese for 2008 standards, but now that's like the second most common body type in the UK and the US. 4. Ironically enough, because this is like the 28th generation of humans that live on the cruise liner, most wouldn't even know about what the life before the cruise liner was, and without a frame of reference, couldn't compare it to anything else, so they couldn't want for anything that they aren't aware of. 5. They probably have ridiculously good healthcare that could probably treat the ill effects of obesity, otherwise they would have already likely eaten themselves to death. And for the negatives, I guess you could say you probably could get a pretty nasty bed sore after lying on a floating chair for extended periods, but maybe they have super advanced seats that don't allow for that. And that's about it for the Wall-E dystopian future. In this future, humanity is capable of long-duration space travel and has very advanced planet surveying technology. So yeah, this one is easily going into the better than ours tier. Okay, now more about the donations. I chose 3 charities for the sponsorship money to be donated to, and I like my choices. The first was to Men's Minds Matter, a charity that works with men struggling with their mental health and specialize in psychological interventions to prevent the worst from happening. They also, funnily enough, have a Magic Mike partnership as well, which, if you know the lore of the channel, it's pretty funny. The men this charity work with are often the neglected and loneliest in society, so I'm glad to help in any way that I can. The second charity that I've chosen was ActionAid, a charity that specifically works with impoverished women and girls around the world. They work with some of the most vulnerable women facing war, famine, natural disasters, so I'm happy knowing that my donation maybe could make life a little easier and safer for those suffering in some of the most difficult situations that anyone could be put in. The final charity that I've chosen is the Hind Rajab Foundation. This charity works to prosecute war criminals and child murderers. They coordinate with law firms internationally to prosecute war criminals whenever they step foot in any of the countries they operate in. I believe that people who murder children should have to answer for their crimes and fully support what they do. One final thing I have to say is that none of this was possible without all you guys watching and supporting the channel, so I have to say that this donation is as much from you as it is from me, so thank you for what you guys have done. But anyway, that's all we have for the part 2 of the Dystopian Futures tier list. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing, but other than that, thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye.